Introducing the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya live stream and live chat. Do you have a question from any of the following areas? Land survey, valuation, building survey, land administration, engineering survey, estate agency, property management, and geospatial information management. Join the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya live stream and live chat every Friday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Good afternoon, our viewers and members of ISK, members of the public, and any other viewer across this country or the globe. My name is Mwenda Makadimo, and I am a past chairman of the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya, and my specialty is land economics. I'm a member of the estate management and valuation chapter of the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya, but my expertise runs across the disciplines of land management, land governance, valuation, building survey, and also estate agency, including environmental management and environmental policy. So I wish to welcome you to today's program, and our topic is policy influencing in land governance with the Kenyan context, or within the Kenyan context. And it is an important discussion that we are having today that touches all aspects of decision making in land governance in Kenya, and generally land governance. We wish to remind you again that every Friday 2 o'clock we have this program running on YouTube. So every other Friday you're invited to join us. Welcome. You can cut that.
It's okay.
Okay. Now, to begin with today's discussion, we need to ask ourselves then what is policy? I mean, what is policy, so that we have a common measure of what we are going to discuss. Policy generally is a broad statement of intent by an authority or government of how it wishes to carry on the activity or a certain program, or carry on with certain implementation of certain decisions. So in this respect, when we discuss land policy, it is the broad statement, especially by the authority of government in Kenya, on how it is going to handle matters of land governance or matters of decision making and implementation in the land sector, or with respect to land. So that is what we are discussing. And policy does not comprise only one document. It is good to understand that many documents make up a policy. There could be one document, like session of paper, that is passed by parliament that comprises a policy, but there could be several session of papers. Again, the constitution, which is the supreme law of the country, is the biggest and the strongest and the most fundamental policy document. So again, the constitution gives policy direction and general intent of how land governance will be done. Then the statutes or the legislation are also policy documents, because they give direction that will be taken in land governance. Delegated legislation or subsidiary legislation, like regulations, also given by government, comprise policy. There are also other broader sectoral policies that inform this kind of policy. At times also, you could have not laws, but generally agreed principles that the country has signed into internationally, that also form part of policy that influences land governance. So in a nutshell, land policy in Kenya comprises the Constitution of Kenya 2010. It comprises all statutes that Kenya has enacted with respect to land, or regulations that Kenya has passed in relation to land, and also the international instruments that Kenya has executed, and the sessional papers that relate to any aspect of land. Of key importance is the sessional paper on national land use policy and the sessional paper on national land policy. Those are the key sessional papers that Kenya has passed specific to land. But there are other sessional papers and there are other documents that relate to an aspect of land, say environment, and others that are connected to what we generally view as land. And therefore, these are the policies that we wish to discuss how one would influence them, or how they are influenced in terms of the content of their development, the process of their development, and also their implementation and their review. That is what entails our discussion today. So we begin first of all with a position that land in Kenya has been a subject of interest, deep interest, and it is at the center of national leadership and national governance, because it was at the center of the struggle for independence, because generally with the background of Kenyan land having been acquired by the colonialists without their consent, it became part of the struggle for independence. And we have to appreciate that the development of land policy in Kenya, as known within that context, started during the colonial periods in terms of policies that were written policies in terms of the statutes I've talked about, in terms of regulations, and in terms of orders or legal orders that were given by government. That is the colonial government. But the unwritten policies, the customary policies that are unwritten, that are enshrined in Kenyan community customs, existed way before any visitor from the external world came to this country. Not that we did not have policies, but we had policies. The traditional authorities had policies about land governance, only that their policies were not written, they were not codified. So there has been some misinformation that there never existed policies, but there were, because those policies were passed from generation to generation orally and contained in the customs. But the ones that have been written formally in terms of formal legislation, formal sessional papers, started being written in the way we know, in the Western way of writing, when the colonial powers came to Kenya, and when they started governing this country. So with that history, it is understood that the philosophies and the principles that informed the colonial land policies, the colonial laws regarding to land, the regulations, were those that were informed by the interests of the colonial government, not the interest of the indigenous people in Kenya, not the interests of the Kenyan communities that existed. So they were informed by non-equity, discrimination. They were informed by cetra interests of exploiting resources from Kenya for export to the European, or to the British rather, to the British side, to England and to Britain, because that was the colonial authority, and for export to other countries, but for meeting the interests of the foreigners. Even before, when Arabs came to the coastline, whatever they were implementing, whatever the Sultan was implementing, was for the interests of the Arabs. It was not for the interests of Kenyans. But that be as it may, the Kenyan government, independent government, had the authority to take decisions and to influence policy development. But it started with a policy environment that was skewed to favor foreign interests. For instance, ownership of land, private ownership of land, was skewed towards white domination. The distribution of land in the towns and in the White Islands was skewed towards non-equity, towards foreigners owning all the land and Kenyans being displaced. But the Kenyans were placed into what would be derogatory called reserves. So therefore, what laws there were, even for delineation or for distribution of land within the what was customary land, was generally the areas that were being demarcated, and the laws that were done was just to keep the Africans within enclaves and confines. They were not informed by principles of equity, principles of efficiency, principles of justice, principles of fairness. And generally, even the issuance of title deeds, the registration, all those policies were skewed in that manner. So therefore, the first way of influencing how land policy evolved in the country was the influence came from a political direction, international political direction. That means British-led political direction and economic direction. But then that also led to struggles. The struggle for independence, the Mau Mau struggle. So again, the policy influence that made Africans start getting titles and start getting some rights and being recognized was also influenced by the struggle, because then there was a political struggle to get land back, get ownership rights back. So that was a way of also influencing. Of course, the commercial brokers or commercial power bearers, international commercial power bearers, had a way of influencing what was happening locally. Then at independence, the struggle for independence, of course, influenced how land governance took shape. Remember, the agreement at Lancaster was that the land rights for the British and other foreigners be respected. That again, that Lancaster conference had policy influence on how the land law took shape in the country. But again, thereafter, there was the financing that was done for settlement of Africans, and then also the elite that took power had their interests, and that influenced their change of law, because most of what was done in terms of legislation had the favor of those elites, and the structures really remained, only that the powers of decision making moved from the queen or the king to the presidency, and therefore the concentration of power on making decisions on land remained with the presidency. And that political influence, and the political elite that came, their political philosophy is what has influenced the way land governance evolved, the way the adjudication and the settlement schemes were done, and then the way the laws were passed were influenced largely from that political philosophy. There is also the other influence that has evolved since then of the freedom fighters seeking to be settled, seeking land, those who were in the forests, those who fought for freedom, saying, oh, we need to be settled. And how those schemes were done. The doing of those schemes, the settlement schemes, again, was also influenced by those who had administrative power, those who had political power, those who had religious power. That's how the policies continued to be influenced. But it has to be noted that this country did not have a codified land policy that is very, very specific on only land until 2009. So you can see from 1963 to 2009 was quite a period having a country without a codified land policy. But that is not unique to Kenya. There are many countries still up to date that do not have a single codified land policy. But maybe what informed that is that the political leadership and the political arrangements were not comfortable dismantling the structures that were there at colonial time and at independence that gave advantages to the political elite and those with the power to change that arrangement to achieve equity and to redistribute land in a manner that is fair to everybody. But then with the pressure that came from growth of the population, the economic challenges, and also the legal awareness of the citizenry became a key influencer to seeking to change that status of land governance in Kenya. The fight for democracy, the democratic space, fight for human rights also influenced the fight for land rights, and therefore the need to get the constitutional framework very, very clear and make it one that procures justice on land governance. And that's why the changing of the independent constitution needed to happen, because the independent constitution recognized or was giving more recognition to the private land registration processes and ownership than the customary land, what one would traditionally call customary land, and now it is called community land. So that distinction favored those who had private property rights registered. The need to have communal land recognized and given the same status was necessary, and therefore these groups, the human rights groups, the political rights groups, the researchers in the land sector played a key role in changing and in trying to influence how that policy change happened. So therefore that is by way of background as to the way policy has been influenced. But we need to understand that there are several levels of influencing land governance policy. The first level is the executive level, the executive arm of government. The Ministry of Lands represents that executive department that deals with matters of land governance in the country. So at the executive level, those with executive authority, the minister, the principal secretary, the directors, and the public officers who work within the Ministry of Lands have a lot of power in influencing policy, because they are the ones who do this administration and governance and making of decisions over land every other day. So they are the primary arm that would inform how intent, how plans will go, how regulations will go. They are the original people with the mandate, the day-to-day mandate of ensuring that these policy directions are developed. Policy directions, their development originally would emanate from the Ministry of Lands, and of course through the cabinet and the presidency. So that's a key institution. So if you wish to influence that, then it is important to seek the cabinet secretary, the operations of the cabinet secretary, and the principal secretary, and the directorates to originate the policy issues that would then identify which problems are to be addressed, which plans will address them, which targets, and who will be the players. But again, you notice that they would originate, but there is the constitutional direction on the National Land Commission to advise the national government on land policy and land registration programs. So therefore, you find the National Land Commission again having an authority from the Constitution to advise on national land policy. So influencing policy then would take the shape of advice that is coming from the National Land Commission. And also, you find from what the National Land Commission advises and what advice the ministry takes and the government, then land policies would be developed, draft land policies would be developed. But having them developed at that level, they have to seek cabinet approval. And therefore, if you wish to influence again, the cabinet is the other point of intervention. After the cabinet, they have to find their way to the legislative arm of government. They go to parliament, because parliament is in charge of all making of all laws. So again, they're in charge of legislation, they're in charge of passing the regulations, and also passing also the sessional papers. So then what comes from the executive has to be taken through the parliamentary process. And within parliament, there are departmental committees. There is a departmental committee on land and environment. And within Senate, again, there is that departmental committee. So at the National Assembly and at the Senate, and in Parliament in totality. So policy influencing again happens within the committee levels of Parliament, those two houses, where the committees also again invite public participation. They have their researchers, they have the committee members who are elected, and these are the ones then who look at the documents that have come from executive, bring in public participation, and then shape them up. So again, the other point of influence is at Parliament. Notice that the legislative arm is very, very, very strong, and it's the final arm. Once they debate it, pass it, they take it to the whole house, and it is passed. Then after that, it goes back to the presidency to be signed or to be given assent, if it is a law, if it is a statute, or if it is regulations do not need to be signed by the president. Once they are passed by parliament, they are okay. But statutes have to be. If it's changing the constitution, again, that as either the popular public initiative, like it is happening with the BBI, or then it can be originated by parliament again. So you find that role happening there. At the devolved level, there are aspects of policy like relating to planning that have been directed by the constitution, that are passed also by county assemblies, and that are recommended by the executive of the counties. So again, they pass through the departments that deal with land and planning at the county level, and then they are taken to county assembly. So again, the county assembly is another platform of influencing, because they have a committee, and at the county government also, and they are allowed also to do both the laws at the county and also to do the regulations. So at that level, you get that legislative and the executive arms again. Now, there is the judiciary that also has a role in influencing policy, because the judiciary interprets all these laws, so, and they make law through case law. So the decisions of the judiciary also gives policy direction. So when judges are determining cases relating to land rights, relating to land use, relating to planning, and any other matters of land governance, then their decisions form part of the law. So again, they have a level of influencing policy or determining or making policy. So therefore, it is important that these places or these processes are all well understood, and the inputs that people would have. The other people who have power of influencing policy and who can influence what goes into policy are the multilateral and international bodies that deal with matters relating to land. For instance, the African Union as the African land policy guidelines. So at the African Union level, there is the Land Policy Center that does research and has prepared guidelines that then are taken to be shared by all African governments. And because Kenya is a member of the African Union, those principles then would find their way coming into the Kenyan laws. Then again, you have other players like the United Nations, where matters relating to land would be discussed. Although land is recognized as matters that are controlled by national countries because of the need for sovereignty, there are soft laws, soft principles that are agreed at the United Nations that then would influence how land policies develop. Like, for instance, now when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals and the agenda for Sustainable Development Goals that most countries are signed to, those goals will talk about issues of respecting property, issues of sustainable land governance, issues of participation, issues of gender rights, issues of climate rights, that all relate to land. Again, also issues of housing, they relate to land and land use. But there are soft principles that influence how policy happens within the jurisdiction of Kenya. And our constitution, again, acknowledges and actually says whatever treaties that Kenya has ratified, they become part of Kenyan law. So they become a source of influencing what happens within our land governance frameworks. Now, the business community, the private sector, have a lot of influence also in policy development. For instance, we have KEPSA, that is a big lobby for the private sector, because they seek to influence policies for ease of doing business. So again, they have voice, and they provide a lobby, a platform lobby that will be used. The professional bodies, like the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya, are also a strong voice, because the professionals in practice also have the experiences they get in decisions of land governance, land administration, and they would use those decisions and voice them to the executive, to parliament, in form of memoranda or in form of submissions, and they would lend their expertise in developing those policies. Again, they would give their expertise in shaping the ideas that are coming from public and from their experience and from their knowledge, and channeling them into improving how land is governed. Again, people who are in the academic fields, in our research institutions, in the universities, do a lot of research that influence the tools, the methodologies, the approaches. So the universities, the scholars also have a lot of influence, and they would publish new ideas on how to improve, say, security of land rights, on how to improve land information management, on how to improve issues of equity, issues of surveying, on any other issues, including technical issues that inform policy. So again, what is written, what is developed from research from those institutions becomes avenues of policy influencing that would be utilized to influence policy in the country. The non-state actors, the civil society that work in the land sector, become also a very, very important constituency, because they also do work with communities, and they give interface on some of these issues, and they would become good points of influencing what is happening, and good channels of bringing what is happening in communities or in their spheres of influence, and bringing it into the policy fold, either to the government agencies or to the academia or to the public or to the media or even to parliament. So civil society is a key sector or a key group that then would influence policy and how policies are developed with respect to land governance. Now, the media, both print and audio and even visual media, the conventional is a key sector or a key group that influences policy, because what they communicate, they bring the real issues of the effects of policy influencing, the information that relates to policy that then would be useful in shaping the direction that the policy development takes. The groups that own large estates or even real estate, those groups of investors are also influential, because they are lobbies. Other than the private sector, they are lobbies of developers, lobbies of farmer organizations, lobbies of livestock groups. They become very, very, very important in influencing policy and their views. Again, all land users, other than these business lobbies, all land users, for instance, communities, would influence how policy is developed, because when there is public participation, community lobbies, for instance, the pastoral community lobbies, indigenous community lobbies, agricultural community lobbies, those community institutions are very, very important in especially bringing about the cultural and the practical issues that they are facing within regimes of land use, land rights, and land administration as feedback that then would be used to shape up the policy dialogue and policy agenda. Financiers, those who finance projects, especially people like World Bank, IFC, also develop their guidelines and principles, and these, although not binding in the country, when they sign contracts, say with Kenya, on some aspects, say like resettlement of people affected by projects, and how they will be compensated, they have power to influence policies. So that, in a nutshell, those are the players that influence policy and on land governance that are, and they all have different powers. Let us now take a break. When we come back, we will move on to look at the challenges and the tools that they use and how best to make them effective for development of land governance policy.
Je, umewahi kusikia kuhusu mpango wa Habahaba na NSSF? Habahaba na NSSF ni mpango unaolenga kuinua biashara ndogondogo na zile za wastani. Wanachama katika makundi haya wanaweza kuweka akiba ya kuanzia shilingi 25 kila siku na kuruhusiwa kutoa 50% ya jumla ya akiba zao baada ya kuweka akiba mfululizo kwa kipindi cha miaka 5.
Kulipa NSSF imekuwa rahisi kupitia simu, kwa sababu naweza lipia wakati wowote. Hata nikiwa kwa stage nimefika na nikumbuke sijalipa NSSF, naweza tuma na simu. Kuliko hapo awali ilikuwa lazima ungeenda kwa ofisi za NSSF ama kwa bank ndio submit your payments, but through M-Pesa imekuwa rahisi, na tunashukuru kwa huo mpango, kwa sababu si lazima ningoje pesa yote ifike. Naweza tuma shilingi 25 kwa siku, na kufikia mwezi pesa yangu itakuwa imeingia yote kwa mwezi. Kwa hivyo tunashukuru kwa hiyo malipo ya simu.
Ili kujiunga na mpango huu, bonyeza *303#. Kwa maelezo zaidi, tafadhali tupigie simu bila malipo kwa nambari 080022127444. Habahaba ni kujipanga.
Welcome again to our program. Just as a reminder, I'm Dr. Mwenda Bakadhimo, and I am an expert in land economics and environmental policy, and a past chairman of the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya. Welcome back to this discussion. Today we are discussing influencing policy with respect to land governance in Kenya. So as we have said, all these bodies that have powers or mandate or a lot of authority or network and abilities to influence policy do not have the same powers. There are those, of course, with more power than the rest. For instance, those who have direct mandate, the executive, it is by law that they are given work to deal with policy. But it doesn't mean policy is theirs. The policy that they develop, must be one that follows the principles in the supreme law. For instance, what Article 60 gives of the Constitution must be respected by the executive, because ultimately it is the Constitution that has been passed by all Kenyans that governs all aspects, and the ultimate test is compliance with the Constitution. But as we said, the Constitution can be amended either through popular citizen approach or through a parliament. So therefore, one single person may not be the one who does the policy or influences, because policy must be agreed, because it's from a governance point. This the whole country. It has to balance the interests of the citizens of the country and carry their aspirations of the interests. But as a single person, one can initiate the dialogue. For instance, one can petition even court on a key policy issue if it feels that it is infringing a certain right or causing a certain harm. Even a group, and once Environment, say, and Land Court or the Constitutional Court makes that decision, then it becomes the policy directive that is binding by law. So if you feel the executive and the rest are not making good decision, you can. Even a policy passed by parliament, if citizens are dissatisfied with it, then directions can be sought from the court that then remove those aspects or make decisions that remove those policies that are found to be unfair and going against especially say the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. Again, one can have input. You can petition your member of parliament to initiate a private member's bill or motion that then influences policy if it is debated and agreed by the other members of parliament and passed. So that's another way. Again, one can publish work, research and public work, and share with the results with the policy institutions and make policy briefs that then inform. If you are an individual private scholar or a think tank or a professional body, and you can initiate, even a community can initiate a policy brief, but then they use these avenues that I'm talking about to make it get into the sphere of being agreed and recognized as an instrument of policy in the country. One can write a memoranda to the National Land Commission and seek to put their ideas and seek to have the National Land Commission carry their advisory on land policy to government, because then it is an independent institution that is set by the Constitution, and those ideas, whether on public land, private land, community land, whatever aspect of policy, they are allowed to be channeled through that. Again, one can write to the minister, to the cabinet secretary, to the principal secretary, and channel the ideas. They can seek meetings there, even covering issues through media, the national media. They would then create discussions and forums that would get these ideas discussed, and they find their way. These lobbies that I've said do exist, of non-state actors, of private sector, of commercial groups, of social groups that relates to human rights, that relates to gender rights, that relates to youth rights, could find their way into lobbying for policy. The researchers and the thought leaders in the discipline from our universities, from the policy institutes, from KIPRA, and from others would then also be able to carry out thematic areas, research on certain thematic areas and the aspects that they feel are important, and use them to advise government. And then they would find their way into the policy table. Notice that the policy documents themselves can be continuously improved. Like the laws I've said, because Parliament and Senate have power to even oversight how laws are being implemented. So if the implementation appears not to be okay, one can petition the committee in Parliament to question or to hold accountable the officers, and also give policy advisories that would help in that manner. Even at the international levels, because there are fora, the UN meets every year. The AU meets every year. It even has a special conference on land. The World Bank has a special conference on land. But basically, these are international ideas that we are talking about. But within the Kenyan context, the legal side, the legal institutions that have the mandate, as I've said, can listen. They have the power. They are compelled by the Constitution to give information to the public and also ensure public participation. So whenever the policy is being made, they are required by law to give information to public, give notice to public, invite ideas from everybody, from every citizen, announce in the radios, announce on TVs, even announce on social media, so that these ideas come. And these ideas then and memoranda would be analyzed, and they would form part of the policy documents that are developed. Parliament should ensure, as per the law, that in every decision they are making, there is public participation. They invite memoranda from the public, even when the executive has given them documents. So again, even as a private citizen, you can go to Parliament before the committee, even as groups, and present your policy issues. Even as communities, you can petition Parliament, you can petition the Senate, not necessarily through your member. If your member is not keen, you can go directly as a private group and write your memoranda to the clerk of the National Assembly, to the clerk of the County Assembly, and it will be channeled to the committees, and you'll be able to follow that. And if it doesn't find a way and you feel you may not get justice, I've said again, one can even petition court to make a certain decision over an infringement of a right or policy, whether it is land use, whether it is land rights or ownership, or even the manner of dispute being resolved, or even the speed within which a certain decision is required, even orders to a government office. So again, that comprises avenues of getting policy influence. But there has been ways also, because public action is allowed. Even picketing on a matter of public land rights is allowed by the Constitution of Kenya. If that voice is not heard, then people can even go and picket before the executive, before the offices, and place their issues, and those issues will be listened. But of course, picketing becomes the last bit. There are all these avenues, the friendly, the deliberate avenues. The people who do research would do what we call evidence-based action research. That action research would focus on specific problems that then would be resolved, and they would give suggestions of how to resolve them. If you have issues, special issues like displacements, that's why I've said even picketing is important, of displacements that may be done in a manner that is not right, or where people feel their rights are not being respected. I've said court action is available. I've said demonstrations are available. I have said that you can write petitions, the memoranda, through also the administrators, government administrators, and they find their way into the executive. So again, there are all these avenues. Now, institutions of higher learning can carry out research to analyze how effective policy implementation has been. Professional bodies also could have forums of analyzing objectively how policy implementation has been. And they have power to bring to the table the government officers, the government departments, even those in Parliament. Again, there can be oversight meetings where parliamentary sessions are allowed committee sessions are allowed to have meetings of reviewing progress and oversight. And also NGOs could also, or civil society could also arrange for those forums. Academic institutions can have seminars and conferences that are organized that review. Citizen scorecards can be invited or are invited through media, through that discourse, by media, by stations, so that the issues that are pertinent to how decisions are being made and how implementation of policy is happening. So all these are avenues of feedback and reviews. For instance, now, the land policy that was passed in 2009 was meant to be reviewed after 10 years. That review is right now, and the government, the ministry, ought to have called the stakeholders. So stakeholders can lobby and they can advocate and they can call for forums to review that document. Professional bodies, as I said, the civil society, land sector, state actors, the National Land Commission can give reports on that review. Even Parliament, the committees, even private citizens, they can petition for that review through Parliament to be done or to be seen to be done. So those are the avenues that are available and the tools that people have that they would use then for influencing policy, for influencing how land governance is done in the country. And again, all these things that we have discussed, if you have any views, if you have any queries, if you have any suggestions, experts like ourselves are available to respond at the institution of surveyors or even in our private capacities to help bring clarity and also help shape the ideas and bring awareness so that every citizen feels part and parcel of governance of land in the country as the Constitution of Kenya mandates. So thank you very much again for being with us in this discussion. We invite your views and your continued engagement as we keep carrying on with these programs and this series. Your views on any topic, any issue you wish discussed will be welcome, and we will see how best to address them so that we meet or we continue meeting our objective of using our knowledge to empower society. Thank you very much.
Introducing the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya live stream and live chat. Do you have a question from any of the following areas? Land survey, valuation, building survey, land administration, engineering survey, estate agency, property management, and geospatial information management. Join the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya live stream and live chat every Friday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.